right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, looking at the latest pictures that Urs posted on his Instagram here. Still not full physique updates. We still don't really know what he's looking like. And I think that it's still fair to say that going into this weekend, you've got the Italy Pro, you've got the Florida Pro, you've got the Hafthor 510kg deadlift attempt. I'd say out of all those things, I think the thing that most people are anticipating and looking forward to seeing this weekend in the world of bodybuilding is Urs Kalsinski's open debut. Now, I think the big question with Urs is, will he be big enough? Now, we know he said at the last Olympia he was weighing 225 pounds or 102.5 kilos. And then like a week or two ago, he said that his body weight going into this competition, his open debut, is 118 kilos, 260 pounds. Now, 260 on paper is a good size for an open bodybuilder. That seems like it would be big enough. But Urs is a taller guy. I believe he's around 6 foot tall, which in the world of open bodybuilding is pretty tall. So how is his physique going to look near 260 pounds? I'm assuming he's not going to be 260 on stage. I would assume it's going to be less than that. So let's say 250 to 260 on Urs's physique on a 6 foot-ish frame coming from Classic. How is that going to look in open? And my concern is, will he look big enough? We know that Urs is going to have the shape. He's going to have a great shape. I'm assuming Urs is going to be in good condition because he's been known for that in Classic Physique. I think we can count on Urs coming in shape. But will he have enough size to hang with these bigger guys at this Italy Pro? I think that's the main question. And I think the reason for that question is like the last minute nature of Urs announcing that he's going to be switching to open. It was just, essentially weeks out from the Olympia. It seems like it may have been kind of a last minute end of prep decision. Like maybe he was planning for most of this prep to still be trying to do the Classic Physique Olympia. And then maybe towards the end, he decided, okay, my weight's just not going to be able to come down enough. I'm not going to be able to make weight for Classic, and I've got to make a switch to open. It seemed like, at least it felt like it was kind of a last-minute decision, and maybe he was still actively prepping for Classic Physique in the meantime. And I think the reason why that could be a concern is I don't think that Urs has had even one full off-season with the goal of open bodybuilding in mind to try to put on a significant amount of size to make that switch. Because Urs was already really big in the offseason. I don't think that was something that he changed this time around to get to 260. So I don't know how much added stage muscle we're actually going to see and if that's going to be enough. I feel like at a minimum, Urs would need like one dedicated year with a dedicated offseason to putting on size and then a dedicated prep for an open show to do really well. But you never know. That's the wild card with Urs because we don't know what he's looking like. He could look fantastic. He could be big enough. And he could theoretically come in and win this Italy show or the Germany show and get that qualification for the 2025 Open Olympia, which I think would be the most exciting possible thing that we could see happen between now and the Olympia, would be Urs somehow winning his open debut and then immediately going to compete in the Open Olympia. I just have a feeling he's probably going to need more size. And like I look at these pictures, and obviously he's still pretty covered up in these pictures. You can't see a whole lot of what's going on. He still, even covered up, doesn't quite look to have the silhouette or the size or the width of like a seasoned open guy. And that's because he's not. He's not a seasoned open bodybuilder. He's a seasoned Classic Physique guy. And he does look bigger in these pictures. But again, we can't really tell anything about how he's looking other than maybe his silhouette, like in the clothing. Does he look open? Not necessarily. And I think a good example of that is this shot of him from the back where he's just standing there. And again, of course, he's got a shirt on, so this is all just very much speculation. But if you look at his silhouette, the width of him from the back, obviously he's a big guy. He's a Classic Physique pro. But looking at him from the back, even with this shirt on, it just doesn't really look the same as it would if you were looking at Samson Dauda or Nick Walker or Derek Lunsford from the back. they would look wider. They would have a little bit more width. And so that's my only concern with Urs, is that maybe he won't have enough size because this open debut seems a little bit last minute. It doesn't seem like he's had a dedicated offseason or a dedicated prep specifically to open bodybuilding yet. But again, we don't really know. He didn't really clarify that when he made his post announcing the transition to open, but I feel like we can kind of assume up until he made that decision, he was still planning on potentially doing the Classic Olympia. And even though I've already said this multiple times at this point, the one-to-one transition thing, Classic to open is not a one-to-one transition like 212 to open is. Different criteria, different poses, etc. So, like, those attributes that made him so successful in Classic, his structure, his lines, that aesthetic flow to his physique, it'll carry him to some extent in open bodybuilding, but it's not going to carry him as far as it did in Classic. And that's where he needs to balance out the other aspects like size, which was not as important in Classic, but I would say is probably more important even than the aesthetics in open bodybuilding at this point. So my feeling at this point going into Italy is that it's probably still going to be between, I think it'll be between Quentin and Theo for the win, with Urs potentially being this wild card. If he comes in just and looks ridiculously good and he could come in and win, he's like the wild card. But I feel like it's going to be between Quentin and Theo. Like, for example, I was looking at this update that Tim Budeshiem posted today, and Tim will likely be in the first call out. He brings really good condition. He's dense. He's muscular. But look at these updates, like from a size standpoint, from a muscle mass standpoint. I don't think we're going to see this kind of size on Urs. And I think realistically, Tim is probably looking at a 3, 4, 5-ish placing range. I don't think, he could be in the conversation to win. I don't know. But I think it's going to be maybe more like 3 or 4 for Tim Budeshiem. But look at the size that he carries. Because he's been doing this, he's been doing open for a long time now. He's had all these off seasons to put on that size and kind of season that muscle that he's put on. Which is the other thing too, like even if Urs had taken this whole off season between the Olympia and now to focus on growing and focus on open, that new tissue that he put on, it's fresh, it's new. It hasn't had time to really mature, and that's another thing to consider here too. And I don't think that he did have that offseason completely focused on the switch to open. He might have, but I don't think he did. And so you look at these updates from a guy like Tim Budeshiem, and I think when you look at this type of size, that's going to be hard for Urs to deal with. Again, a taller guy, a harder frame to fill out because he's taller, maybe between 250 to 260 on stage. Possibly, could be less than that. How wide is he going to look in a lineup with guys that include guys like Tim Budeshiem? How big, how muscular is he going to look in a lineup that includes guys like Tim Budeshiem? I mean, this is a big, muscular, dense dude that has seasoned, mature muscle. And I would even add this. I think that it would be good if it is difficult for a Classic guy to make a transition to open. I think it should be hard. I think it should take time, because the harder it is for a Classic guy to come over to open and put on the size necessary, that further emphasizes how very different Classic physique as a division is from open bodybuilding. They shouldn't be easy to jump from one to the other because they are two very different things. So I think if Urs comes out of the gate and does really well or wins the show, it would be good, it would be cool, it would be exciting. But then it might mean, how different is Classic and open really? If he's able to that easily put on the size and his physique is able to do that well right out of the gate, versus if he's not able to do that well right out of the gate and still needs a significant amount of time to put on the size to make it an open, that's a different conversation, because it goes to show, okay, open is a very different thing than Classic, and that's why it's a hard process to get from Classic to open, because they're just not the same thing. So while that would be disappointing if Urs didn't win or do well, I think it would also be kind of good because it re-emphasizes that difference. Like Chris Bumstead, a 6-time Classic physique Mr. Olympia, probably one of the bigger, more muscular guys in Classic physique. He didn't even win his open debut. So I would say to measure your expectations a little bit when it comes to Urs at these shows. Don't be shocked and disappointed if he doesn't win, because the bar is high to switch from Classic to open, and he doesn't necessarily need to hit that bar right out of the gate. I'm sure he wants to. I want him to. I'd love to see him win. But just keep that in mind. There should be a big difference between Open and Classic, and it should not be easy for Urs to come in and win an Open show, regardless of how good he was in Classic, because Classic is different. It shouldn't be that easy. In fact, I would say, now that we've seen this lineup for Italy, I would say it would be a huge win for Urs to, I'd say, crack the top 4 at this show. To me, that's a win for Urs. That would be validation for him that he's good enough to compete in Open, even in a pretty last-minute switch from Classic, and he's good enough to beat, like I said, there's like 25 guys or something competing in this show, so he's good enough to beat 20 other Open guys right out of the gate if he is able to get, a top 4 spot. So I would say just be realistic. Now, next up in the news, aside from Italy, we've also got Hafthor Bjornsson on Saturday, September 6th, attempting the 510kg deadlift. This was his most recent deadlift in training for that competition. I know it was 6 days ago, but this is the last update that he's posted of that deadlift, 410 kgs. Moving, to me, lightning quick, considering how heavy that weight is. Personally, I think Hafthor is going to get the 510. Watching him do the 505 kilo deadlift a few weeks ago or a month ago, however long ago that was, to me it looked like he had a lot more left in the tank, and I think that we're going to see a successful new world record attempt this weekend on Saturday. So we've actually got a lot of stuff to look forward to this weekend between the Florida Pro, the Italy Pro, the Hafthor Bjornsson deadlift attempt. We are certainly going to be entertained on this first weekend of September. And speaking of the Florida Pro, this is the most recent update of Logan Franklin, just 2 days out from trying to qualify for the 2025 Olympia. Logan looks awesome, man. I don't know how many I can, say it without sounding redundant. I'm sure I already do. I know I'm very redundant about saying that Logan's one of my favorite classic physiques, if not my favorite classic physique right now. But man, to me, every time I see him post a physique update, I just think this is such a good representation of what the classic physique division is all about. His shape, his structure, his lines, the way his physique flows. This, to me, is what classic physique is. And I can't wait to see him on the Olympia stage. Again, another prediction here. I think he's going to win the Florida Pro, get his Olympia qualification. I would be honestly shocked if Logan doesn't win this show and doesn't qualify for the Olympia here. I think if he doesn't win here, I think there's maybe one more classic qualifier before the Olympia, maybe 2. I think just 1. But this is about as last minute as it gets for a qualification opportunity. So I think he's pretty confident by picking this show so close to the qualification cutoff deadline. I think that's confident in him saying, okay, the Olympia is my goal, so I'm going to wait to qualify until right before the cutoff because I'm that confident that I'm not going to be beaten outside of the Olympia. I think that's good. But to me, this is just what classic is all about. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.